Alright, there's a few more things that I found that I want to talk about. One is the exposure cap or the eyepiece cap that comes with the camera. It's not just for protecting the eyepiece. The eyepiece light that enters the eyepiece can actually affect your camera's exposure if you're not holding it up to your face. What that means is if you have the camera on a tripod and you're using the timer mode, or you're using the interval timer mode, or you're using a cable release or software to trigger the camera to take a picture, the exposure could be wrong if there's a significant amount of light entering the eyepiece. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to hold the back of my camera up to my LCD monitor and take a picture of my back wall. So I'm going to set the camera to programmable auto mode, just leave it in automatic exposure. I've got 3D focus, I've got everything basic. I'm going to hold the camera back up to my LCD, which is kind of bright, and take a picture of my back wall. As you see, it's fairly underexposed. Now I'll hold it up to my eye and do the same thing. Significantly brighter. Let's can look at the histogram to compare. There's the exposure that I was holding the back of the camera up to my LCD monitor. And there's the exposure when I was looking through the viewfinder with my eye. So, there's a couple workarounds. One is, before you take the picture, you can look at what the camera, like hold your eye up to the viewfinder, find what exposure the camera's going to use, find the aperture it's going to use, and look at the make a note of the aperture the camera's going to use, and make a note of the shutter speed the camera's going to use, and then go to full manual mode and set those values. Then you can use your timer and know that the exposure is going to be appropriate because you've pre-measured it. The other option is if you've got the exposure lock button, you can set the exposure lock button to this, set it to exposure lock hold, and so then what you do is point the camera at wherever you're going to be taking a picture, hit the exposure lock button, and then set the timer and take the picture. Now the trick is that you've got to have your exposure lock, you have to have your exposure meter running long enough for your timer to take the picture. Otherwise it'll lose the saved value. So you can set that in the exposure timer. That is the auto meter off delay. Set that to like a minute or something so that you don't lose your metering reading. The other option is to bring the eyepiece cap with you and take the little rubber guard off and put the eyepiece cap on whenever you're not going to be holding the camera up to your face. Now I'm going to go through the programmable buttons because I didn't cover that very well in my walkthrough. Go down to the controls. You've got 3 buttons that you can assign. One's on the front bottom of the camera, one's on the front top of the camera, and one's on the back top of the camera. And although these buttons are labeled, they don't need to be. Each button can do anything any of the other buttons can do. They're all equal. They're just 3 buttons that can all be customized to do the same things. So I'm only going to go through one of them because all of them look the same. For each button, you've got 2 ways to use it. You've got one button. You've got one mode where when you press the button, that option takes effect immediately, such as these options right here. So, like, if I push the button down, I'll immediately see a preview. A preview means it'll set the aperture to whatever the camera is going to shoot at, so that you can preview the depth of field, even though the viewfinder is kind of small when you're looking through the iris or the viewfinder. Also, if you've got modeling flash enabled and the flash is on, the flash will fire a continuous burst for about 1 second so that you can kind of approximately see how much lighting will hit the target and how it will lay. It doesn't work very well though. Flash value lock, that's useful for so what flash value lock does, let's see, and show you what the help says. I'll just hold help down while I talk about it. It's mostly useful for pre-measuring how much flash power you're going to need so that the camera doesn't hit the flash, so that the flash doesn't fire twice when you take a picture of somebody. If you notice that when you take a picture of someone and they're always blinking, you can just hit the flash value lock button. The flash will fire. It'll pre-measure how much flash it needs when you take the picture, and then when you take the picture, the flash will fire once at full power. Well, not full power, but at the power that it needs, and your subject won't have time to blink. That saved setting will go away as soon as the exposure meter goes to sleep, or until you hit the button again. So you may want to set the exposure timer to last longer or shorter, but just be aware that once the exposure lights go out in the viewfinder, you're going to have to remeasure that flash value. Also note that if you recompose the subject, they like have a different background, or you zoom in, or you step back, or get closer, you're going to want to remeasure that flash value. Anything that changes the composition, you're going to want to remeasure the flash value. But if your subject isn't moving, then you can just keep taking pictures over and over again, and it'll keep using the same setting and should be fine. Exposure lock and focus lock means while you're holding the button down, you can recompose the camera and take the picture, and it won't adjust the exposure or focus while the button's held down. Same thing for exposure. It'll keep the same exposure setting. AE lock means that once you hit the button, it will take the exposure in memory and save it, and you can let go of the button and recompose your image, and then when you take the picture, it'll use that exposure that it measured when you push the button the first time, and then after the picture's over, it'll clear the memory and you're ready to take another picture at whatever exposure it meters. AE lock hold is useful for taking panoramas where you're going to have a whole bunch of pictures and stitch them together later. You hit the button one time, it takes a meter reading of that scene, and every picture afterwards will have that same exposure until you hit the button again, or until the exposure meter goes to sleep, which by default is 8 seconds. So if you're going to have more than an 8-second pause between pictures, you're going to want to extend that. Otherwise, you're going to have to start all over again with your panorama multi-shoot picture or multi-shot picture. Autofocus lock only, which means when you hold the button down, you can recompose the camera and the focus won't change, but the exposure will be remeasured when you take the picture. Flash off, if you've got like an SB800 or an SB600 on, and for some reason you don't want to use it for a particular shot, you can hold that button and it'll turn the flash off. Same thing with the built-in flash. If the thing is popped up and you don't want to use it for one particular shot, hold the button down when it's set to that mode and it'll skip the flash. Bracketing burst, when you hold the button down, the camera, if it's in single shot mode, it can't be in continuous mode. If it's in single shot mode and you hold the bracketing burst button down, then the camera will take as many pictures as you have set up for bracketing. So if you've got 9 frames in bracketing, the camera will take 9 consecutive shots as fast as it can. If you've got 3 frames, it will take 3 shots as fast as it can, and then stop. Matrix metering means that while you're holding the button down, it'll use matrix metering if for some reason the camera's like in some other metering mode. If you prefer to stay in matrix metering mode most of the time, but every once in a while you want to spot meter something, then you can set a button to be a spot metering mode, so you don't have to turn the little dial to change the metering mode. You can just do a one-time shot, nice and quick. I might use that for my black cat that has bright yellow eyes. Usually I want to do matrix metering, but when I take pictures of the cat, the eyes are always overexposed because it meters for her black body. So if I do a quick spot metering on her eye, then I get a proper exposing on her eye, and I don't worry about the body, or I brighten up the body afterwards in Photoshop or something like that.